David, when you were first presenting the idea of a college for this region, I'd be interested in how people received that, on all sides of the coin, good, bad, and otherwise. Would you tell us a little bit who were your original champions?
Well, I think one of the things we did right, we did some things right and we did some things not so right, but one of the things we did right was to contact the National Association of Junior Colleges and ask them what material they had that we could present to the people of the district about a junior college. And they sent us, back in those days, no PowerPoints, no computers, none of that stuff. They sent us a slideshow and a little video presentation. And we took that around. To form the district, we had to get 5 contiguous counties. And they had to have 400 graduating seniors, a $60 million tax base, which seems ridiculous today, but back then that was a lot of money. And in order to get that tax base, we really had to include Climax Molybdenum Company because they were the big player. There was no Vail. Aspen was just getting off the ground with Walter Papke at that time. And to get the 5 contiguous counties, we had to include Lake County with Leadville. So when we got those all put together, and Climax agreed to do it if they could have a campus and a mining program up there, then they would come in. So that's why we started with the dual campus here in Spring Valley and up there in Leadville. And then we had to travel through those 5 counties that we had put together and sell it. And we did receive good reception, because if you take a product on the road and actually meet the people, we went to the Kiwanis clubs, PTAs, chambers of commerce, anybody we could talk to anywhere, and show them actually what it is and the possibility of them having a place for their young people to come at a reasonable cost to get their first 2 years of college or get a technical degree. It got a good reception. Most people said that would be great. Had a little problem up there with Summit County because they were way off on the edge there in Breckenridge. And they actually never voted for it. When we had the vote, they had to come in kicking and screaming because the other 4 counties voted for it. Now they've got a nice facility.
Yes, we might mention that Summit County voted no and now has 2 campuses, right, David? You Summit Countyers out there. I do want to say before I ask a question to another one of our panelists, I do want to recognize Ann Delaplane, who's here with David today. Ann is David's bride. And if starting a college wasn't enough, they are also the parents of 8 sons. So now, speaking of champions, if we can turn to our landowners and our incredible champions as well. Jim, in addition to the great horse, I understand that about this time, you were a young man in your first years of marriage, living and working on a ranch up in Spring Valley here. And then one clear moment stands out to you as how you got involved in the college. Would you please tell us about that?
Well, the first time I heard about the college was when Mary Ann's uncle, Jim Quigley, rode in on his horse, and I was in the milk barn. So Jim says, what do you think if we give some land and we'll have a college up here? And I'm thinking, maybe Jim's got a loose screw again. So anyway, it went on, and I thought, this thing's going to fizzle out. It ain't going to happen. And so Jim's a pretty determined guy. He was an old rancher all of his life, and he never give up on anything. So it went on, and it just kept developing, and pretty soon, by golly, it happened. And here we are today, and what a great place this is.
So Jim, I'll have you pass the mic to your bride. So you, Sharon, you and Jim were newlyweds with a young family and a ranch that was your livelihood. To donate your land was a pretty big ask, certainly at that time. What were the conversations like over the dinner table? And did you say yes right away?
No way. We discussed it some, and remembering back 50-some years ago, it was kind of hard to remember exactly what we said. But we were skeptical. You know, we just couldn't believe, with the remoteness of the land up here, that it could ever happen. And then the more the neighbors talked and the group that was putting this package together talked, the more it seemed feasible. And so here we are, one of the best assets we could have to the community of Glenwood Springs.
And as a result, to many other mountain communities as well, right? It starts with an idea. So that Mr. Quigley, who rode up on his horse and first talked to the Nislonics about that, happened to be your uncle, Marianne. Marianne and I had coffee recently. I learned something every single time I visit with her. He and your father were instrumental in convening all of the multiple families up in this area into gifting what ended up being this absolutely exceptional, amazing, beautiful, gorgeous 800 acres from all of the ranchers combined. You and your sisters were kids back then. All of a sudden, there were college kids in what had been your quiet backyard. What was that like? And did you have much interaction with the college as your neighbors?
Yes, I did. I had just graduated from high school, and it was like an awesome thing to have somebody down the road instead of nobody driving down the road. And I was here the very first day, the very first year, which doesn't seem like 50 years ago, I can tell you that. But I've been passionate about CMC for 50 years and worked here for the first 25 years.
So, Jim, there's a saying, never look a gift horse in the mouth. But in fact, the town wasn't sold on your original offer of land, and there was quite a conversation about where the campus would end up. And I recall in my conversations with David that there was a little spot where a Target exists right now in Glenwood Springs, and that had been it had been advised that you not go there, right? The college not go there because it's a big, huge, shifting alluvial fan. Geologically, and everything that sits on that cracks, right? But it was in town. This was not in town. It's still not in town. So talk a little bit about what that took and what it really took to finally bring the college up to this spectacular place.
Well, there was a chunk of property up on 4 Mile called the old Martino Ranch that fellow purchased, and he was going to give that land to for the college at the price that he paid for it. So Jim Quigley, at that time we had agreed to each give 40 acres. There was 5 ranchers, 5 that kind of cornered right here, and we were going to give, like in our part, we were going to give 40 acres. Well, Jim Quigley says, maybe we ought to up the ante a little bit. See, 40 acres would have made about 400 acres. Anyway, so Jim says, well, let's up the ante on the land and make it 800 acres. So anyway, we did, and it went better for us to have it up here, and I think in the long run, it's better off up here now than it would have been in the other places that they first were going to put it.
It's great. It's great knowledge for us. So David, you might have a perspective on this as well. Would you share that with us?
I'm really glad for this opportunity because the most difficult decision it was called the governing committee then. They're trustees now, aren't they? The most difficult decision the governing committee made was a site decision. The people in the town were very, very desirable for it to be down there. And even though we were offered the Union Oil land, which is where the Target store and all the mall and all that stuff is now, off of Red Mountain, it was determined by geologists that it was an alluvial fan, it was unstable, so we made a decision not to go there. And people are telling me the buildings are cracking there now. I don't know. And then the Martino thing came up, and we began to work on that. I, being the Glenwood representative, did everything I possibly could to keep it away from Spring Valley. And this probably resulted in some tension between me and these ranchers. And, you know, it was a very, very hard decision. And the rest of the governing committee was looking at me as the Glenwood representative. I held out as long as I could. I knew if I decided on Spring Valley, there would be a lot of heat from the town. But at the end, I knew the unity of the governing committee and the beauty of this site, it had to be. And we finally, after back and forth, we voted for it and then voted against it because of me. and then back and voted for it. It was the most difficult, and I took a lot of heat from the town for it. It was the most difficult, but the best decision I ever made. 20/20 hindsight can tell you that. And I wanted to say that this gift was a phenomenal gift. Can you imagine giving 800 acres of this beautiful land to create one of the most beautiful educational sites in the country? And so it was right, and you were right all along, and I want to say that now. And I think and I think that probably they deserve another standing ovation for this phenomenal gift. It's taken me 50 years to make that apology, Jim and Marianne.
Could I say one thing?
There's a retort in there. I can just hear it. Go ahead, Jim.
David, you know, I'm beginning to like you just a little bit.
Time is an amazing thing, isn't it? So one more question to David before I open it up. In the first year, the college struggled. Didn't meet enrollment projections, and it looked like the college might not survive. What did you do, and what did the other trustees do to make the fact that all of us are in the room today possible?
Well, you know, a fledgling child sometimes has its problems, and certainly that first year was among them. But the best thing that happened was that not only did the people of the district vote for the college, they voted to tax themselves, and they voted for a mill levy. And after a decision is made, whether they liked it or not, whether they voted for it or not, they all taxed themselves to create the district, and once they bought into something, they want to protect it. And I don't think there was any way that anybody in this district was going to let that die, because they were paying the bill for it, and they were going to do everything they could to make it go. And they did. I mean, everybody came together and tried to help in enrollments. Fortunately, we didn't have to rely totally on tuition, and that helped. And that's how we were able to survive.
You know, and I'll just add a little audible moment here, and that is that we've had trustees and governing boards over the years who have avoided the pressure to become something different, and that would be a state institution, and thinking that that might be a safe way to go for funding. And I think we all know that the gift that happened 50 plus years ago in creating this institution, and the fact that our communities continue to support us the way they do, means that all of us are stewards of our shareholders, certainly some of the largest shareholders we have on this stage, and to return on the investment you've made in us and our communities have made in us. And we do that by virtue of the example we've just seen over the past weekend and tomorrow evening and all the graduates that walk across the stage. So we are so genuinely, absolutely grateful and thankful for all that you have done. So as you look back, I'll sort of maybe end on this, and one other moment I will say is, Steamboat Springs, Routt County, has its own story. We don't want to forget that. It was a 5-county district originally, and the Steamboat Springs School District and part of Routt County is part of our family now too. I have my conscience sitting here in the front row. And it is equally as impressive and lots of very similar components to the story in one woman, Lucy Bogue, who took it upon herself to have a higher education in Steamboat Springs and in essentially the northwest corner of Colorado, and did everything very similar story to make sure that happened. It was originally Yampa Valley College, but over the course of years, which we'll continue to try to celebrate over our 50th anniversary, to weave that story in, became a part of the college. And one of the things that I think is so spectacular and so amazing is that in both cases, our college was born out of a Chamber of Commerce. And we are absolutely connected to our workforce and our local economies. And were it not for the Glenwood Springs Chamber of Commerce, when David was there, and the Steamboat Springs Chamber of Commerce, neither of those enterprises, and collectively now our enterprise, certainly wouldn't exist. And we're certainly engaged in our chambers and other workforce partners in all of our mountain communities now. But we obviously also owe a great deal of thanks to folks who said, I'm not letting this happen. I'm not letting this college die. And look at us now. It's absolutely incredible. So thanks to each of you. Absolutely.
One thing about Steamboat, when we were deciding which counties to put together, our first choice was Routt and Moffett, Steamboat and Craig. And we contacted them, and they asked not to be in it because they were trying to develop this college on their own. And that's the reason we went east to Leadville. But originally, we wanted to include Steamboat first.
Well, some things happen for a reason, right? And now they're part of the family. So if you wouldn't mind, all of you, I would love for you just to take a moment and say, what do you go and go, wow, reflecting back, what's sort of the most impactful on your mind about what has become of the college? What do you think about the most in terms of this incredible journey that the college has taken? And then I'll ask you, what do you think the next 50 years looks like, and what should the college really be in the next 50 years? And Sharon, if I can just start with you, maybe move our way down, that would be great.
Well, it took several years for us to see what was going to happen. None of you probably remember back that far, but the college struggled for a few years. At one point, I don't know if it was 15, 20 years after they had started, that they actually thought they were going to have to leave Spring Valley and give all the land back. That kind of bothered us. But if you sit and look now and see what's happened, the interest around the community is finally inspired. The student body is growing. And I had the chance last spring to sit in the Glenwood graduation, and I bet there was between 30 and 40 young students in that graduating class who were going to stay home and come to CMC. Now, if this isn't an asset to the community, what can we claim anymore?
Well, when Sharon said we might get our land back, I'm thinking, that might not be a bad idea. I'm just kidding. No. No, I grew up here, and the college is one of the most wonderful things that's happened up here. It's really a great asset to the community. It's a great asset to the people that live up here. And it's a great asset to everybody in the area and all the branches. How many branches are there now? 11? So it's spread out to be in 11 branches in the whole area in western Colorado. So it's amazing how the thing has grown, and it's great.
My reflection is that it was like a baby that has grown up to be a very successful adult. Because in the beginning years, it was a little baby that needed a lot of nurturing and care, and it was small. Everybody knew each other, bonded together, and then as it became a teenager, it became a little wild, and then it's an adult, and it's a functioning adult.
Well, I was just overwhelmed yesterday when I came up here after 40. I hadn't been up here for 48 years, and I came up yesterday, and Kristen took me around a bit, and it was just overwhelming. The beauty and the wonder of this place is just spectacular. When in the original days, we sought advice from Dr. Medici, who was the president of Mesa Junior College. It was Mesa Junior College then. And now it's become a major university in western Colorado. And I envision 50 years from now, this will be a bigger and better university than any other university in Colorado.
Well, I certainly hope, and I think this is shared by everyone in the room. We hope what you see is incredibly gratifying, and I hope you know that we, as the current stewards of your gift, take it very seriously. And we know the responsibility you have to our communities and certainly to our students and to your families. It's remarkable. David was kind enough to speak to a legislative group a year or so ago of legislators from all over the state. And behind him, we put on the screen that 500,000 students have come through the doors of Colorado Mountain College since it was started. Sharon's going, wow. It's really amazing. So thank you so much to all of you, to your families, and certainly to others that are not represented on the stage today. It certainly took a village. Not only did we get off to an incredible start, but it is such a gift to have living legends who are part of this history and part of helping us celebrate not only the last 50 years, but launching into the next 50 years. There's just not many organizations that get that, and so I want you to know how much we value and appreciate that. Certainly, David, you served on the Board of Trustees. He also tells me that 2 of the 9, I would be 9 presidents of the college have died in plane crashes, so he reminds me of that with some regularity. So no small planes or helicopters.
The first 2 presidents we hired, really, both died in plane crashes. And if Carrie dies, it's going to be off of a mountain. And we've told her not to do that. I wanted to say, talking about the development of the college, I think this last year or so, it's taken a quantum leap forward when the governing people of Colorado Mountain College decided to hire Dr. Carrie Hauser. And I think she needs a standing ovation.
Very nice of you, David. So the Nislanics have remained neighbors. I live right across the way too in Spring Valley, so I am also their neighbor. I can see part of your property, and now serve up Uncle Jimmy's pig every year. That's fattened up on the food scraps here from our cafeteria. You saw some of our composting efforts, and that has I think Steamboat Springs did that for the first time this year, and Leadville did that as well. So something else has started. Not only do we have horses, we have pigs and all other sorts of traditions. And Mary McPhee, who we acknowledged at commencement this past weekend, who works for our Sodexo team, is also a Nislanic, and she's brought incredible sustainable initiatives to our campus. She's leaving us to take a promotion and moving, and I imagine that comes with some sadness. It certainly does with her, but she's been part of our DNA here, certainly. Mary Ann mentioned that she's worked for the college Your children and nieces and nephews have all attended CMC at some point. So there certainly is that legacy as well. I want to absolutely, again, thank our special guest today and ask you for another round of applause for people who made a little college in the mountains possible 50 years ago. Thank you very much. So I do want to mention also, just a little point of privilege, you all know that Lynn Stickler, who's come back to the college as Vice President for Student Affairs, is retiring again, right? And we will not let her leave. So Lynn has agreed to come back and essentially be the head of our 50th anniversary planning year. She will take sort of June off after she retires at the end of May. So if you have ideas, thoughts, anything, I want to make sure. Lynn had a little time with David yesterday, and that was great. But certainly appreciate Lynn for coming back again and helping us with something that you only get to do once every 50 years, right? So we're going to do it right. So David has graciously agreed. If any of you have not signed up for a session this afternoon, or if you have a gap in your schedule, if you might like to switch, David's agreed to spend a little more time with us today. So he will be, and certainly our other guests are certainly welcome to stay as well, but he will be in the Student Center in the Residence Hall and just open conversations. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the history of the college, say thank you to him, stop by. Certainly to our guests on the stage, I want to make sure that you know to do this at 2 o'clock. It's in the Residence Hall in the Student Center. So please think about that. I also want to say to David, you just think about the folder. What if he hadn't picked up the folder and said, "What is this?" I mean, think about that. It's amazing. None of us would be in the room today. None of us would be in the room today. So we're certainly grateful, and we know that there were a lot of folks that were part of that, and it always takes one, right? It takes Lucy Bogue and Steamboat. It takes others that have made this happen. So we today are naming David Delaplane as the Grand Marshal of our 50th anniversary. And that is very heavy, so we will help you with that, David. And that thing down there is even heavier, so that it goes in. But that is for every parade, for everything that David contributes or participates in over the next year or so, 18 months, we want to make sure that he had the appropriate saber to do that. So I'll put that back. Yes! David says we should have given that to him when he was a little younger. We'll give it to Anne, and she could take care of that. So that's for David. We want to make sure that he had something appropriate for that. So, Doug, tell me how we are. Good? Oh, thank goodness. Love it. So, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to, just so that our panelists can actually see what's going to be on the screen, we'll take you off stage so that you can do that. Thank them again, please, for being with us today.